She was still out there. It had been hours since V had stopped asking me to let her in. She'd finally gone quiet, though the occasional dull thump against the door had been her own obstinate way of telling me she wasn't giving up. Laying in the tub had been a bad idea, and I'd eventually resigned myself to sitting with my back against the door. Every so often I would hear a sigh or shuffle from the other side, and I didn't doubt she could hear me as well. It may have been childish, yet there was something oddly comforting in sharing silence as we both waited for the inevitable. I couldn't rush out the door and make a beeline for the van in a desperate bid for escape no matter how much I wanted to. That would only make me look like an even bigger gonk than I already was. At least I had cleaned up the glass and wiped the floor down so I wasn't sitting in a puddle of my own making. No, I'd run away for as long as I could, and I couldn't hide forever. I needed to face her. I was simply afraid to. Time and space were the two things I needed most right now. To go someplace where I didn't feel trapped and could process everything that had happened. I'd considered many options. I could drive aimlessly around the city for hours, though I'd burned through a ton of Chew H2 and fuel wasn't getting any cheaper. Mateo might be willing to meet me at Lizzie's and let me inside, though it was still morning, and I wasn't looking forward to sharing my den with the dude Susie had hired. I could grab a table at a diner and buy a cup of coffee every few hours so I wouldn't get the boot, but I'd only end up just people watching and not accomplishing anything. There hadn't seemed to be anywhere I could go until the idea had suddenly popped into my head. Rita had been just as surprised to receive my message as I had been sending it. I had been clear on my intent. I was not interested in hooking up. Rather, I needed a place where I could unwind a little. At least, that's what my message said. It was only after she had agreed and told me to swing by that I admitted the truth to myself. I needed an ear, one that wasn't V's, and, as sad as it was, I didn't know anyone else I could talk to. But I had to get there first, which meant I had to get past V. V? I heard V draw a sharp breath. Had she fallen asleep? Yeah? I'm gonna swing by Rita's for a bit. After spending half the night without saying a word to one another, that seemed like a bad way to start a conversation. I bit my lip. The long stretch of silence made it feel like we were on opposite sides of the earth. She had to be waiting for me to say something more. Hell, she'd been waiting ever since the day we'd first met, even if she didn't know. V? Yeah, Judy? I looked up on the ceiling, realizing I was on the verge of piercing my lip. Sorry for what I said. Didn't mean it. I know you're sorry. And I know you didn't really mean what you said. But you did say it, Jude. All of it. I'm not sure if you even realize what came out of your mouth. I do, I admitted, my face turning red. Kinda hard not to, considering it's all I've been thinking about. There was another long stretch of silence before I heard shuffling on the other side of the door. Will you open the door, please? I moved lethargically and rose to my feet, knowing that every second brought me closer to the looming confrontation. Everything I had said to cut her loose, to push her away. I couldn't take any of it back. Swallowing, I pressed my finger against the control panel on the wall, removing the barrier between us. V stood with her back against the far wall, eyes just as puffy and bloodshot as my own surely were. I didn't know what to expect as I stared back at her. She seemed calm and composed, but I had said such awful things that I didn't love her. That had to be rattling inside her head. I'd hurt her. She had every right to be angry with me. "Can I hug you?" My throat tightened and my cheeks burned. I had to grip my teeth so I could hold myself together as I nodded, permitting V to approach. She paused to study me, and possibly to make sure I wasn't bullshitting her yet again, before carefully wrapping her arms over my shoulders and pulling me in tight. "I'm sorry, V," I whispered. "What are you sorry for?" "For everything, No." Her voice remained calm, yet firm. "You shouldn't be sorry for everything. In fact, it sounds like there's a lot of things you shouldn't be sorry for." "I'm sorry I lied to you." "I know." V held me in her embrace for a long time. Even though my ass ached from having been planted on the unforgiving tile all night, I felt my muscles slowly loosen until she finally pulled away. "Do you still need to push me? 'Cause I can take it if you need to. I'll know you won't mean it." How did you know?" My mouth turned dry. It wasn't pity I saw in V's eyes, but rather a solemn understanding that suddenly filled me with dread. "Get it off my face." "Later. We're gonna need to talk about all this, but now ain't the right time." "If I'm being completely honest, I also need some time to think about things. You told me a lot of things I already knew, or at least that I suspected, but you also hit me with some things that I didn't. I guess if you feel like you gotta go to Rita's for a while, that's okay. But I need to know that you're gonna be alright, that you're not gonna keep running away from me." A wave of relief washed over me that nearly cut my legs out from under me. She wouldn't force me to talk to her. Not like this. Would I be okay? It seemed impossible, but the confidence in her voice was reassuring. "I'll be alright, and I'm not trying to run away from you or anything like that. I think that's all over and done with now." V nodded. "I hope so. And you're only going to Rita's to hide for a bit longer, right? Nothing else?" Shit. I told her that too, hadn't I? How Rita had nearly fucked me. Why wasn't she screaming in my face not to go over there? I knew I wouldn't be so trusting if the roles were reversed. "Yeah, I don't know how to talk about all this yet. Not even sure I can. There's so much, V. So much you don't know. I've been feeling like the walls have been closing in on me for so long. Hey, you'll never have a wall with me, except for the ones you put up. I trust you. If talking to Rita is what you need to do, then go do that. I only want you to know that I'm not leaving here. I'm not leaving you. And that I'll be here for you when you're ready to tell me more." She was saying all the right things. Why couldn't I? "Thanks, V. I'm gonna go get cleaned up." V nodded and flashed me a small smile as I walked past her. I stopped by the bedroom door and turned. "And V? Yeah?" If nothing else, there was at least one thing I could tell her now. One thing I knew I could part with so I could give her some confidence in me. "I know you said that you knew I didn't mean any of it, what I said, but I still hurt you. I'm really sorry about that. I do love you. Fuck, I sound so fucked up." Shit, did I ever. I'd gone from blaming V for every wrong in my life to professing my love for her in the time span of a few hours. No wonder she was so worried about me. I rubbed at my eyes, trying to clear away my fatigue so I could think straight, and was startled when a pair of warm hands rested on my shoulders. "I love you too. Go do what you need to do. We'll get there." "Is it okay if I message you throughout the day?" "Yeah," I sniffled, realizing how close I had come to tears. "Thanks for letting me do this. It's okay. Just be careful and call me if you need to." It didn't take long to shed the rags I'd been wearing for nearly 2 days and to grab a clean shirt and pair of jeans before hopping in the shower. When I finished, I examined myself in the mirror as I tied my hair back, feeling too lazy to comb it. Once again, I wasn't sure who was looking back at me. She was notably thinner and paler, large bags sitting under sunken, bewildered eyes. Was this who I was? Or who I was becoming? V was sitting at the counter when I stepped out of the bathroom and grabbed my keys. I could tell she was doing her best to put on an understanding front, but still didn't want me to leave. "I love you, Judy." It felt strange hearing her say that again so soon, so seriously, but I suspected she thought I needed to hear it again. Maybe I did. Honesty and openness. How could something so simple be so hard to do? I love you too, V. The drive to Rita's took longer than I thought it would. I timed it poorly and wound up getting stuck in the rush hour. I should have welcomed the delay. It was the first time in a week, other than my panicked excursion last night, that I had been outside and the sun was shining. But I kept my windows rolled up and my eyes focused on the road ahead of me as I traversed one block after another, finally catching sight of the mega building Rita lived in up ahead. Like all the enormous structures dotting the city, there was a garage beneath them, meaning I'd have to park where there was little chance of being seen or heard. I managed to find a space close to the elevator, but it was still too far away for my liking. Eventually, it became clear I would have to wait for hours for someone to walk by. I took a deep, shaky breath and stepped out of the van. The sound of my footsteps echoing off the cavernous walls made me shudder. But just like every day since they'd grabbed me, no one was waiting for me. Rita's apartment was on the 67th floor, which gave me plenty of time to think about what I was doing as I slowly rose above the city. A part of me was still angry at her for having enabled me, trying to fuck me, but she hadn't told V about it either. Sure, she might have ended up trading fists with her, but something in the back of my mind told me that wasn't the real reason. I'd seen plenty of these cookie-cutter apartments over the years, and this one was no different except for the "fuck to death" sticker plastered on her door. It made me chuckle as I pressed my finger to the intercom. "Rita?" "Hey," a groggy voice replied. "Be right there." When the door opened, I was greeted by the heavy scent of incense rushing into my nostrils. That, and something else I quickly recognized. It was faint, but still enough to immediately make my pulse start to race. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all, but Rita was already ushering me inside. I tried to ignore the way the smell grew stronger as the door closed shut behind me. I came to a stop and realized that while my own apartment wasn't much to look at, it was practically a palace by comparison. A dim light crept between the shutters, affording me enough light to see across the confined studio. There was a small bathroom to my left, though I didn't have time to survey the mess of cosmetics scattered about the sink. Further in, I spotted the customary alcove with a bed that looked like it hadn't been made in weeks, sheets and blankets heaped onto the floor. And ahead of me, a small living area with a torn-up couch and table situated beneath a holo display. That was it. The entirety of Rita Wheeler's life was tucked inside of this tiny apartment, and there was still room left over for more. "Sorry about the mess," Rita mumbled, sitting on the couch. "It's all right. You should see our place." It was the courteous thing to say, even if it was an outright lie. We certainly weren't the epitome of tidiness, but V and I would never have made it together if our place looked anything like this dump. Still, I could feel my eyes wanting to wander about like a kid in a toy store, curious to see what I could learn about Rita now that I was getting a glimpse into her life. But I kept my head locked in place and focused on her. Rita appeared a far cry from her usual outlandish self. She wore a baggy sweatshirt, the sleeves of which were tattered and frayed. Her pants hadn't fared any better, and I must have woken her up judging from her disheveled appearance. Hell, she'd only managed to throw on some lipstick before I caught myself. It wasn't lipstick. I had seen that dark stain on her lips the day I'd retrieved my keys from her, and I had seen it on my own countless times before. Her eyes were glassy, though she seemed lucid enough to see where my attention was being drawn to. Still a little high, she confessed sheepishly. Didn't know you were going to message me. It's okay. I didn't know I was going to message you either. Rita hummed to herself and leaned back, resting her head against the couch. I was glad for my jacket as her lidded eyes slowly wandered over me, not bothering to remain decent. My pocket buzzed as another message from V appeared on my HUD. I had to hand it to her. She hadn't been kidding when she'd said she would be messaging me throughout the day, but it was comforting for her to have cast a line out to me in the way that she had. She wasn't probing for details, just making sure I was okay, and reminding me she would be ready to talk when I got home. Hopefully, I would be ready to talk too. Something wrong? No, I said, taking my hollow out of my pocket to type a quick reply letting her know I was okay. So, what's up? Again, I began to have reservations about coming here. Maybe if she wasn't fucked up, hadn't tried to fuck me up, I could talk to her. But in this state, would she even understand what I was saying? I didn't mean to wake you. In fact, I should probably go. No, wait! Rita bounced up, her eyes widening. I'm sorry. You know how this shit is. What it does to you. Yeah, I do. All too well. Perhaps that was why I was talking to Rita instead of V. She was a kindred spirit. I'd always known we had a great deal in common. I simply hadn't realized how much. How long have you, been puffin'? She asked. Think Janice said it best when you took that hit. Impressive. I think probably 12 years or so? Since I last puffed, I mean. 18 if you're asking when I started. As high as she was, Rita's eyes still sharpened into fine points. How old are you? Thought you were like 29 or... I'm 30, Rita. You were at my bash earlier this year, remember? At Lizzie's? Oh shit, that's right. Sorry, I forgot. But wait. That would mean you were 12 when you started? What the fuck were you doing as a kid? What had I done? It all spilled out of me. Cindy hooking me on lace and turning me out to get what she wanted. How I learned from her to use sex to get what I wanted. How to lie and manipulate others. The shit going on with V and the beauties. My rape, my relapse. I even told her what I suspected I had been trying to do to myself when I OD'd. My sad life was laid bare. One gruesome detail at a time. My abuelo, as much as I loved him, had dragged me off to confessional every fucking Sunday when I was a kid. Such a colossal waste of time. It's important to confess your sins, Judy, if you want forgiveness. Forgiveness? For what? For throwing rocks at the side of Alejandro's house? Stealing Jenny Chapman's doll? If hell was a real place, then there was no way I'd ever avoid it if I had to confess every fucking thing I did wrong. But, for the first time in my life, I understood what he had been trying to tell me. It wasn't a feeling of relief that propelled me forward, but rather a comforting sense of catharsis. Several hours into my monologue, I had stopped talking to Rita and was conversing with myself instead. By the time I'd finally filled her in on what had happened last night, the sun was hanging above the skyline and the fogginess in her eyes was gone. Jesus, Rita finally said. I would have gone with carajo, but yeah. About sums it up. Rita appeared flabbergasted, searching around her apartment as though she'd suddenly awoken inside of a stranger's home. How did she, react? V? I shrugged. Threw every fucking thing I had at her to cut her loose and get her to see me for what I am. Blamed her for all of it. Of course, she saw right through my act, thank fuck. She was great. Better than great, in fact. Shit, Rita exclaimed, raising her eyebrows. Guess I was wrong about her. Yeah, you were, I replied, the memory of what she had said about V still fresh in my mind. Think I mentioned that to you before. That was one thing I could still cling to with pride. That even when I had reached my most fucked up point, I'd still stuck up for V and pushed back against Rita. I'd known she'd been wrong when she said V didn't love me. Surely it had to count for something that I hadn't taken the bait and fucked her that night, didn't it? Yeah, I know you did. But how many outputs would hang around after all of that? Rita shook her head. I know I probably wouldn't. Probably explains why I'm still single, huh? I caught my tongue just in the nick of time. Another small accomplishment. Rita could have her pick from almost anyone she wanted, yet it was telling that in all the years I'd known her, she'd never mentioned the same name twice, and I had caught the self-disparaging tone in her voice as well. You shouldn't, question yourself like that. Not the same situation, whatever's going on with you. Rita sat up and began rummaging through the mess on her table in search of something. Yeah, there's shit going on with me, alright. Same as everyone else, I suppose. It's been fucking with my head for a long time. Not that anyone sees it, of course. Got these preem tits of mine to draw all the attention. I don't know what to tell you, Rita. Giving up on her search, Rita turned her attention back to me. Think you've told me enough. I'd say if V's really planning to stick around, you owe her the same story you told me. Make sure she knows all of it. At least, I think that's what I'm supposed to say. Never told anyone about all my shit. I mean, what do you make of all this? Judy, take one fucking look at me. Rita raised her hands, presenting herself as if to illustrate her point. Do you really take me to be a good judge of character? No, I didn't. Not anymore. She wasn't completely oblivious and had been quick to spot a reflection of herself in me long before I had seen it, but she couldn't have been more wrong about V or what I wanted. Rita had a sexy mystique about her when she stood confidently outside Lizzie's in one of those low-cut shirts of hers that left little to the imagination, but looking at the disheveled woman sitting before me, her lips still stained a deep shade of purple, the illusion had been shattered. Rita, not asking you for a fucking psychoanalysis or something, just what do you think? How fucked up am I? I think, Rita tapped her fingers along the couch, I never would have known any of this was going on if you hadn't told me. Look, I'm really not the right person to be asking about this stuff, but I'd say you got a ton of shit buried a mile deep that's gonna take a long time to dig up. Gonna stink when it's all on the surface. It wasn't a pleasant analogy, but it certainly got the point across. It had taken me 30 years to get this far, but now I knew who and what I was. My own way of thinking about it was less distasteful. Growing up, I sometimes likened myself to a stone under a waterfall, slowly eroding from the pressures of life just like everyone else did. I took comfort, though, in knowing that I would eventually smoothen out into something polished and refined. A better Judy Álvarez. But What if all this time, the rock had been forming cracks beneath its smooth exterior? What if all it would take is one more drop for it to crumble into pieces and get carried away by the current? I think you're right, I acknowledged. And I got no clue where or even how to start. Can tell V all of it, sure, but then what? It's not like I'm gonna wake up the next day feeling all happy and shitting rainbows out of my ass. Rita snorted. There's an image I'd pay to see. Just imagine all the eddies Lizzie's would rake in if you scrolled that and edited it into our most preem BD yet. Stop! But I didn't want her to. It was the first time I'd laughed all day. In days. And it felt good. The thought of a BD featuring Lizzie's very own Judy Álvarez, the best braindance editor in all of Night City, blanketing the city in an enormous rainbow erupting from her ass. It was deserving of a few giggles. I felt a welcome release of tension in my chest as a wave of cool euphoria washed over me, almost like taking a hit. Were the fumes starting to get to me? That licorice smell still lingered in the air, making my fingertips itch. Rita soon turned to scanning the floor, searching under old scream sheets and brushing aside piles of trash. Look, Rita said, tossing a dirty shirt to the side. You've been putting on an act for a long time, and I'm sure I must have picked up on it, even subconsciously, though it's hard to know for sure. But I don't think it makes you some kind of pathological liar or anything. You always seemed genuine when you were bitching out Susie for whatever stunt she'd cooked up. I let out a small laugh, though the mention of Susie's name suddenly reminded me my days at Lizzie's were numbered. What was I going to do? I'm sorry she's cutting you loose, by the way, Rita added. We all think it's gonna mean the end of Lizzie's. Would that be a bad thing? For Lizzie's to shut down? Either the streets were getting rougher or my stomach weaker. But things had changed so much since the first time I had dived into the world of BD. Even the mention of the word morality would draw a laugh, and it seemed humanity was on a constant hunt for the newest and most outrageous experience. Things had only grown worse under Susie's leadership, and there didn't seem to be any end in sight. I checked the time. Speaking of which, we should both get a move on. Club opens in an hour. Rita started to stand, but something flashed behind her eyes and she paused. Judy? Yeah? Since you've told me every ugly detail about your life, I figure I might as well tell you one of my own. I knew what I was doing the whole time, trying to get close to you. And it's even worse now that you know. Well, now that you know how I feel about you. She was really going there. I'd considered bringing up what had happened between us that night, maybe even hinted at it a time or two, but I'd already opened enough old wounds for the day, and I wasn't sure it was a good idea to open any of hers as well. I won't lie to you, Rita, which, ironically, is something I'm gonna need to work on. But what you did really hurt me. Felt like a betrayal. I crossed my arms. I always thought you were looking out for me, not trying to butter me up. And that night outside the club, when you hit me up and offered me something, it felt like you were trying to sink me when I was already going under. I know, Rita said quietly. Like I said, I'm all kinds of screwed up. Well, maybe that's why I wanted to talk to you first. Seeing the confusion on her face, I quickly added, I don't mean it like that. I think you actually had it right that night in my den. We're the same in a lot of ways, probably more than either of us knew, and I'm not holding a grudge against you or anything like that. You listened to me today, and I appreciate that. Rita seemed to relax, a small smile crossing her face. You should talk to that gonk of yours when you get home. Tell her what you told me. And if it turns out she's even dumber than she looks and goes running for the hills, well, maybe you'll give me a call? Try a different flavor of cotton candy? I smiled warmly at her, even as I knew she was trying to breathe life into a fantasy that would never come true. Even if V did take off and leave me in the dust, something I no longer believed would happen, Rita and I would never be a thing. Looking at her now was like looking into a mirror. There was too much of myself staring back at me to think we would ever be anything except toxic toward one another. Don't think I'll need to worry about that, but it's flattering all the same. Thanks for listening, Rita. It nearly broke my heart to see the way her smile faltered. It had only been there for a moment, but that was all it took for me to know I'd just slammed the door on a dream of hers. And if what I saw sitting across from me was anything to go by, it certainly wouldn't be the last time Rita would know such pain. You got it, doll. Don't call me doll, doll. Rita chuckled, her eyes still aimlessly searching about her apartment. You gonna follow me over there? I asked. Will do. I'll make sure you don't have any trouble getting to and from the door from now on. Thanks. And Rita? A glimmer of hope sprung in her eyes. I didn't know if what I was about to say would register with her at all. Fuck, I was the last person in Night City who should have been saying it, but a hint of the old Judy had risen to the surface and was demanding to be heard. Yeah? I'm in no place to give advice, seeing as how I'm already up to my own neck in shit, but whatever you're going through, you know you need help, right? Rita looked away sheepishly, and I could tell from her reaction she was already putting up a wall between us. Again, it was like looking into a mirror. Yeah, you're probably right, she waved her hand dismissively. But I'm sure I'll probably forget all about that by later tonight. I'm going out with some of the girls later to Velvet Underground. You could always say no, I said hopefully, giving it one final attempt. Stay inside, maybe brew some coffee instead? But she only laughed. You know I won't. I forced a smile onto my face. The old Judy was desperate to help Rita. She could help her detox, or maybe even check out one of the junkie clinics. But the new Judy shot those ideas down, knowing through her hard-learned wisdom that anything she did would fail if Rita didn't want to be helped. Don't know how you keep up with all of that, I said as I stood and stretched my legs. I'd be face down from dawn to dusk if I was doing half the shit you are. Rita was about to join me when her eyes suddenly widened. Her hand dove between the cushions, and after fishing between them, she finally seized upon what she had been searching for and pulled it out. I looked at the thin cartridge of lipstick she clutched in her grasp. We all got our ways of coping with shit, Rita said as she applied it, masking the dark tint of her lips with a pleasant shade of pink. Why don't you wait for me outside? I'll be out in a few when I've had the chance to freshen up. Freshen up. That had been my go-to excuse as well. I nodded and did as she suggested, ignoring the itching in my palms, even as a part of me wanted to shake some sense into her. She was drowning, and if she didn't ask for help soon, the waves would crash over her. Rita Wheeler would disappear beneath them, vanishing forever. I wanted to throw her a life ring, but I couldn't. I was barely hanging on to my own.